Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a literal game changer of a legal battle that completely shook up the balance of taxation power over in the Philippines. We're looking at a super fascinating Supreme Court case, the city government of San Pablo versus the Manila Electric Company, or as most people know them, Meralco. So let's jump right into this and see how a massive conflict over a local franchise tax completely redefined the boundaries between corporate privilege and local government autonomy.
Let's start with a classic puzzle, right? Imagine that old paradox. What actually happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Well, in the legal world, this exact scenario played out in real life. Can a local city literally force a massive corporate giant to pay taxes if that corporation is holding on to a decades-old national tax exemption? It's the kind of question that really forces us to look at the very foundation of how governments raise money and how corporations try to protect their profits.
All right, let's get into part one, the tax clash. To really understand this clash, we need to rewind a bit to late 1992. That's when the city of San Pablo enacted Ordinance Number 56, which was their comprehensive local revenue code. Under this brand new code, specifically Section 2.09, the city started demanding franchise taxes. And guess who got caught squarely in the crosshairs? Meralco. Between 1994 and 1996, these demands forced the company to cough up over 1.8 million pesos under protest. And you know, that immediately triggered a massive legal showdown because they definitely wanted that money back.
Moving right along to part two, Meralco's legal shield.
Now, Meralco didn't just roll over and surrender to the city's demands. No way. They fought back hard. They traced their franchise all the way back to 1929 with Act 3648, and then to a really crucial presidential decree, PD 551, back in 1974. See, Meralco had this long-standing statutory guarantee. The national government had capped their franchise tax at exactly 2% of their gross receipts. So Meralco's argument was basically that this historical timeline proved their tax immunity was baked right into their very right to operate.
The absolute core of Meralco's defense rested on one very specific, incredibly powerful phrase, in lieu of all taxes. Their franchise explicitly stated that the 2% they were paying to the national government was a total substitute for any and all other national or local taxes. To Meralco, these were basically magic words. It was like an invincible shield protecting them against San Pablo City's new tax ordinance.
Which brings us to part three, the city's new sword.
But here's the catch. The rules of the game changed dramatically on January 1, 1992. That's when the local government code arrived, and this wasn't just some minor update. It was a sweeping, massive overhaul designed to give local municipalities unprecedented power and self-reliance. This right here is the ultimate statutory clash. On one side, you've got Meralco's absolute exemption under PD 551 in lieu of all taxes. On the exact opposite side, completely counteracting it, is the local government code's incredibly aggressive power to tax under Section 137. This section explicitly allows provinces and cities to impose a franchise tax, notwithstanding any exemption granted by any law or other special law. Talk about a direct collision of legislative intent, right?
So the real kicker is found in Section 193 of the new Local Government Code. This section deliberately and systematically withdrew almost all existing tax privileges and incentives that people and corporations were enjoying. It wiped the slate clean, leaving only a tiny handful of survivors, like local water districts, registered cooperatives, and nonprofit hospitals. But notice exactly who is missing from this very short list. Yeah, Meralco, a massive, for-profit electric franchise, is absolutely nowhere to be found.
And that brings us to a super interesting legal principle. The Supreme Court relied on this classic maxim of statutory construction, expressio unius est exclusio alterius. Sounds fancy, right? But it simply means the express mention of one thing excludes all others. Because the new law explicitly listed the very few entities that got to keep their tax exemptions, like those water districts and nonprofit hospitals we just talked about, it legally proved that Meralco's exemption was intentionally killed off by the legislator.
All right, let's dive into part four, the Supreme Court showdown.
So, when this case first went to the regional trial court in San Pablo, get this, the judge actually sided with Meralco. They agreed that the old franchise exemption was still perfectly valid and ordered the city to refund that 1.8 million pesos. But the city of San Pablo, they were not backing down. They took it all the way up, and the Supreme Court had to step in to resolve this pure question of law. They actually bypassed the usual appeals process because there weren't any disputed facts here, just straight-up conflicting laws.
And ultimately, the highest court of the land reversed the lower court's decision, handing a massive, precedent-setting victory right back to the city of San Pablo.
The court delivered a seriously definitive ruling here. The justices declared that corporate exemptions absolutely cannot withstand the unequivocal mandate of the new law. Those magic words that Maricopa relied on for decades, they had to give way to the clear, all-encompassing language of the local government code that was withdrawing those exact privileges.
And the court also pointed out a truly fascinating textual clue that pretty much sealed the deal. See, while the original 1929 franchise protected the electric company against taxes levied now or in the future, the updated 1974 presidential decree noticeably dropped those words, "in the future." The Supreme Court basically deduced that this omission wasn't just a typo or an accident. It intentionally opened the door for future laws, just like the local government code, to step in and impose new taxes.
Let's zoom out a bit for Part 5, Why Local Autonomy Matters.
Look, this explainer isn't just about parsing legal dictionaries or arguing over some Latin phrases. It's really about a fundamental shift in how the nation empowers its communities. The Supreme Court firmly anchored its decision in the constitutional mandate of local autonomy. This is the whole policy, ensuring that cities, provinces, and municipalities aren't just completely dependent on the national government in Manila for their survival. To be truly self-reliant communities, they actually need the power to make their own decisions.
And that brings us to a somewhat harsh reality. Autonomy is literally just an illusion if you don't have the funding to back it up. This ruling brilliantly illustrates that local governments need actual, real-world money to deliver basic services, promote the general welfare, and achieve genuine progress for their people. Like the court so eloquently put it, the power to tax is the most effective instrument to raise those needed revenues. You just can't build roads, fund local police, or support communities on empty promises.
So the crucial takeaway here is a bedrock principle of sovereign law. Maricopa tried to argue that taxing them impaired their original contract with the government, but the Supreme Court hit back, reiterating that corporate franchises are always subject to the state's police power. And more importantly, the sovereign right to tax for the public good is absolute. You simply cannot contract it away forever. No way.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this one thought. We've just seen how a sweeping piece of legislation meant to empower local communities completely dismantled a seemingly invincible corporate tax shield. So as you think about how your own local community funds its growth and its services, consider this. If the most ironclad corporate shields eventually have to yield to public progress, what other untouchable privileges might the law one day redefine? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the balance of power around you.